Let's talk about this and what you think this tax policy is going to look like, both on the corporate and individual side. I think, some of the details are starting to emerge, but where you think the fault lines are going to be with the debate. Sarah?
Well, I think the president's going to come in with a plan that really largely mirrors a lot of what he talked in the campaign about. And that's a 28% corporate rate, the so-called GILTI tax, some issues around the global tax that Secretary Yellen has been speaking about, as well as some changes in the capital gains rate for the highest income earners and the so-called stepped-up basis. However, that's not really necessarily what Congress is going to do with this package. I think we're going to see many more twists and turns on this one than we did on the last relief package. And I think Congress is really only willing to pass a very small fraction of what the president has been talking about.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Raheem, what's your take on what you think the appetite is inside Congress to do something like this? And also, how does this relate, if it does at all, to when we're going to get an infrastructure plan, and whether you think that a new tax regime and the infrastructure, that both of those things get married up together?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I think it's possible that they get married up together. But look, I mean, one thing that we sort of have always known, and Senator McConnell reiterated this yesterday, which is that Republicans are not likely to vote for a bunch of tax increases, not for infrastructure, not, for almost anything that is sort of currently on the table. And so I agree with Sarah that I think the scale of the tax increase is going to be a fraction of what President Biden campaigned on. He campaigned on a $4 trillion of additional taxes. I just don't think there's the political appetite for anything on that order of magnitude. And as it relates to infrastructure, if you want to raise taxes to do infrastructure, it means you got to do it through this sort of partisan budget reconciliation process, the same way that the COVID bill ended up being done. And one thing we learned from the COVID bill is you can't designate specific projects for funding using this fast track process. They tried and out on the Senate floor. And my experience on Capitol Hill is a lot of what members like about infrastructure is the ability to say, I got funding for this bridge, or I got funding for this rail line, or whatever it is. And you just can't do that in a partisan way. So I think there's a lot of pressure to at least try to make what I would consider a legitimate good faith effort, as opposed to a token good faith effort, to try to see if infrastructure can be done in a bipartisan way.
Right. So, Sarah, what's the realistic version in your mind of where you think the corporate tax rate lands? You talked about 28%, where Biden wants it to be. Does it end up there? Does it end up at 25%? What happens to individual tax rates?
Yeah, I think it probably ends up at 25, and I very much agree. I think it's challenging. The president's going to propose this as a package, an investment in return for something being paid for. But I do agree that it may be that the best way to do this is to pull some of the infrastructure forward, or some of the competitiveness issues in R&D that Senator Schumer has been talking about. Perhaps pull that forward into a bipartisan package, and then try to do reconciliation and this budget reconciliation for the rest. There's other priorities the president could get in there. We'll have to see. I think he does have to get caught trying with Republicans, and we'll see what the appetite there is. But the good thing about this president is he is all about getting things done and passed. And I think he'll be flexible in the process if he believes that there is a real opportunity to work in a bipartisan way. If he doesn't see that opportunity, he's going to go ahead and try to get this priority that is so needed in the country finally done.
Well, what's the chance, and just real quick, because of the audience that's watching us this morning, when you think about carried interest, is that finished? Is that we've been having this carried interest debate now for over a decade? Does that finally go? We've talked a lot, even in the past couple of days, about the possibility of a financial transaction tax. Is that something that you think is going to be welcome even among Democrats right now?
I think that the president's most likely to get the corporate rate back to 25, and perhaps the so-called GILTI. He certainly will propose a range of capital gains, whether it is carried interest, a higher rate for the top rate for people making more than $1 million, and then also stepped up basis. Whether or not he's able to get that, my guess is he gets a portion of some of that and perhaps carried interest, as you mentioned. We've been talking about it for about 15 years now, so that may be the one that finally goes. But look, all of these are really difficult for everyone. It's not just the Joe Manchins, it's senators from different parts of the country. And so our view is that he gets something in the $500 billion range for taxes, including some of the ones that you mentioned, but not a lot more.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.